Because it's very difficult to sell the idea that we are an all-inclusive party when we as a party don't even recognize one of the greatest people in our party's history, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, all these great men. They need to be recognized and educated in all the schools and all the Republican groups so that people understand that this party was built upon diversity. This party has always been a party of freedom and progress. Frederick Douglass believed that, so that's why I embrace Frederick Douglass. Okay? So that's a little bit about Frederick Douglass. So, the Frederick Douglass Society. The reason why I created the Frederick Douglass Society is because, quite candidly, I'm sick of the NAACP. I'm sick of the Congressional Black Caucus. Okay? I'm sick of all these liberal institutions that are heavily minority. But the truth is, we can be sick of it all we want, but they're there. They're in the community, they're in the schools, they're in the churches, and we don't like what they are politically, but they're involved with more than politics. They're involved with education. They're involved on all levels. So I understand, and you need to understand, that the only way that we can begin to compete with these liberal organizations that are snatching up our children's future is we've got to get into these communities and we've got to do it frequently. Okay? So I believe that there are three keys, and the Frederick Douglass Society was created for this purpose. There are three keys to outreach and to advancing this party and advancing the message of free market, limited government, individual freedom, and strong defense. Isn't that what the Constitution is all about? And that's frequency. Let me hear you say it. Frequency, relevancy, and sincerity. Try this again. Frequency, relevancy, and sincerity. Frequency means we show up year-round, not just 2 months before the election. That's where liberals have us whipped. Let's face it. Too many of us want to preach to the choir. And how many of you know that preaching to the choir, many of us do that because we're afraid? Someone said tonight, Stacy, you know, we'd like to go out into some of these other communities, but we don't really have a black person to go with us. No, I hear this all the time. I'm going to say that to ridicule somebody. And let's face it, now, before y'all look at me like I'm crazy, how many of y'all go out in the hood talking about the Republican Party? That's what I thought. Some of y'all looking at me like I was funny, but how many, let's face it, how many of you go out into the hood talking about the Republican Party? Not many of you. And it's not because you can't. And it's not because you don't have the ability. It's because you're afraid. Okay? It's because you're afraid. You're afraid, or you're frustrated, or you're tired. Maybe a combination of all three. You're tired because every time you talk to somebody, the first thing they say to you is you're a racist. So you get a little tired of that too, don't you? Or you are so predisposed, you assume that's going to happen, so you don't even try. And so I decided that to whom much is given, much is required. And I created the Frederick Douglass Society because I believe that I'm blessed today to be here. I want to tell you a quick story, and you'll really understand why I'm here and why I connected with Frederick Douglass. Can I do that? I just want to tell you a quick story about a little boy. Okay? I really need my teleprompter for this, Susan. I really do. I want to tell you about a little boy. This little boy grew up in a humble situation, not bad, just humble. And he was born to a very unusual situation because his father was married and he was out there drinking and having a good time. And his mother was a single mother with 2 kids, and she got pregnant by a married man. So she had the child, this gentleman, who was in the Navy apparently, and signed over custody to this gentleman and his wife. Very unusual situation. Long story short, the young man grew up in a home that seemed to be normal until he got to be about 8 or 9 when he found out about the situation with kids. You know the kids in the street talk about everything. They listen to parents and then they go repeat that stuff. Don't they know? That's why my grandmother used to tell me, boy, don't you see grown folks trying to get up out of here? She didn't want to tell her business on the street. So the young man, the young boy, started going through a bit of abuse by the time he was 8 or 9. Young man ended up on the street, hanging out, doing things no young person should be doing at 12. Young man ended up dropping out of school in 7th grade, and by the time he was 14 or 15, he thought he was Nito Brown, the world's greatest hustler or something. I know some of y'all are talking about, who is Nito Brown? That's a ghetto thing, y'all. Don't worry about it. Okay, Nito Brown is like the black Al Capone. How about that? Y'all know who Al Capone is, right? It's already Al Capone. All right. But isn't it fun we can laugh at each other and at each other and not be offended? That's the difference between this audience and a liberal audience. If I just said that a liberal audience, they'd be like, oh, he a sellout. So the young man ended up going in and out of jail in teenage years, and by the time he was 21, he just really couldn't be reached. And by the time he was 25, this young person I'm telling you about ended up in jail, prison. And he was functionally illiterate by this time. How many know you lose what you don't use? How many know that? Okay? And this young man met a police chief who just happened to be a Republican. But more than that, a police chief who had an unwavering faith in God. A police chief who believed that his only role was to spread the mission. His mission was that of Jesus Christ, first and foremost. So this police chief witnessed the gospel to the young man. And when he first tried to do it, the young man looked at him and said, man, why are you talking to me? Are you gay or something? The young man was pretty hardcore. And the police chief, unfazed, because he wasn't concerned about the results. He only wanted to do the mission. He figured the results was God's responsibility. Lo and behold, this police chief did lead this young man to Christ and became his first mentor. And he came to see him while he was in a jail cell, and they came to teach him to read and write to the Bible. This young man ended up meeting another person named Gary Hott, who began to talk to him about politics and conservative ideologies and such, and told this young man, it's time for you to leave the plantation, son. The young man looked at him and said, we good talk with you about that. You never had anybody tell him something like that before. But he gave him a book. And the name of that book was called It's Okay to Leave the Plantation by a man named Mason Weaver. Later, that young man would get out of jail. And within a year of getting out of jail, that young man found himself giving speeches for Dow Chemical, Dow Corning, started his own business. That young man became a mentor to gang members. The young man ended up getting a scholarship to go to Massachusetts to train people in juvenile reentry. This young man later became a national award winner of a Frederick Douglass Award for his work with urban kids. This young man later became one of the greatest headaches to liberals that you'll ever see, because he understood more than anybody the devastating impact socially, emotionally, spiritually of liberalism. This young man is standing before you. His name is Stacy Swimp. So you see, I stand here before you not because I have political ambition. I stand here before you as a result of my life. And I believe that being a Republican is born truly out of our values. The orientation of my lifestyle is based upon my values. My values dictate my politics. That's the message that we've got to take out to these urban communities. And I'm a living witness that you don't need color to reach color. What no black people around me talking about Republicans? I'm just telling you the truth. But the people who came to me were fearless. And I'm telling you tonight, unless we restore ourselves to our values, and we take this fight to liberals and meet them right where they're at, just like that police chief did for me, we're going to lose this great nation. And if you don't believe that, shame on you tonight. Don't you know that Frederick Douglass said it, and I agree, that God plus one is the majority? How many of you know that you do have the advantage? So you go on to these liberal communities and they call you racist said, so what? At least they didn't put a 4-inch thorn through your skull like they did Jesus Christ. See, when they called me somehow, I said, I ain't got no knife wounds. Okay, I ain't got no marks on my skull. I'm not on a cross being sacrificed. That's the best you got is calling me a son? Are you serious? Come on with it. See, when I was growing up, I used to fight a lot because I was a knucklehead. And when I used to fight, I was a knucklehead. And when I used to fight, you couldn't get that fight. Somebody had to come and pull me off of you. Even if you were bludgeoning me, whipping me, I was holding on to you. I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to stop. My determination was I was never going to stop. How many of you know we've got to have that same determination today because liberals, socialists are that determined to take our country over? How many of you know that tonight? So, frequency. I get frustrated because time and time again, I go to various Republican groups and I say, okay, we got to get out here to these urban communities. And urban doesn't just mean black, by the way, because you got all, how many people know you got blacks, Hispanics, you got whites, and how many of you know that even some of our rural white Americans are being forgotten about today? How many of you know that? Okay? So we got to get out to these communities. And time and time again, you know what I hear? Oh, Stacy, well, we tried that before. We can't do that. Oh, it's not worth it. We can't spend our money and effort out there. And so they lose election after election after election, and somehow they're still stupid enough they think they've got a winning formula. They really know what they're talking about. How ridiculous is that? Here in Michigan, where I live at, Debbie Stabenow, one of the worst senators in the nation, in the history of our country. Okay? And there doesn't seem to be the kind of urgency we need to get out into these communities to defeat this woman, because you cannot do it unless you probably get at least 5 to 10% of the minority vote in Michigan. Do you think that the Republicans are swarming into these urban communities today? You think they are? No, they're not. You think Mitt Romney is going to go take Michigan unless we go into Detroit and Flint and Saginaw and these urban communities and begin to explain our truth and our issues and let people understand that, hey, we share the same values. I've never talked to a parent that doesn't want a choice in school. Their kids go to. I've never met a parent yet that doesn't want that choice. I've never met anybody yet. If I ask them, hey, do you want to keep more of your money? Most people say, yeah, I do. I've never met anybody yet that says, no, I don't want to keep more of my money. Most of these people are conservative in their personal values. They just haven't really understood how to juxtapose their personal values, the conservative personal values with conservative political practice. And if we don't explain it to them, if we don't model conservatism to them by going out and building relationships in these communities, I want to know how they're going to know. And somebody might say, why did I go out and do outreach? I didn't need that. I hear that too. I didn't need that. I just read a book. But good for you. Now you know. Now go and do something. And people say, well, Stacy, I believe in separation between church and state, because I tell them, see, if you are a Christian and you are a Republican, you should be compelled to take this message to all the four corners of the earth. You should be. When Jesus told the disciples, go ye into the four corners of the earth and preach this gospel, I don't believe he said, unless that community is black. I don't believe he said, unless that community is Hispanic or Native American. And by the way, guys, don't go to that Hispanic community unless you got some Hispanics with you. I don't think he said that. What he said was, I'm going to leave and I'm going to send a comforter to you that we call the Holy Spirit, who shall teach you all things. So here's the bottom line. The bottom line is Jesus was telling the disciples, look, you don't have the responsibility of bringing about the result. That's my job. Stop trying to play God. Don't worry about that. You just get out there and do the mission. And you speak the truth. And if you speak the truth, then that truth will begin to pierce the souls and the minds and the hearts of men, and sooner or later, it's going to give rise to good fruit. How many of you heard that story before? How many of you know that that is essentially what we have to do as Republicans? We've got to take our mind off of predicted failure or off of past failures. Don't worry about the persecution because you're not better than Jesus and they crucified him. So imagine what they might do to you. Okay? But you got to ask yourself a very serious question. Are your children worth fighting for? Have you ever seen on television what Muslim countries look like? Do you know there's no such thing as freedom over there? Is that what you want for America? And if it's not what you want, you got to fight. Let's stop making excuses. You don't need black people. I get tired of people calling me Stacy. We need a black guy to go with us and talk over here. I'm like, just stop calling me with that. What do you need me for? You're not going to. I'm not going to tell them anything different than you would. Okay, it's not my skin telling me anything. Just means that I can hang out in the sun a little bit longer than some of you. That's it. That's all it means. That's cool too, though, isn't it? I don't need suntan loads. I'm just gonna hang out. God was smart when he created black people. I'm telling you. But really, seriously, it doesn't take color to reach color. It takes frequency. Get out here with your message. Talk to them. But you know what? We've got to educate ourselves about the Republican Party. I would say 80% of the Republicans I meet don't even know the party's history. Okay? 80% of the Republicans I meet could not tell you about all these black congressmen and senators that we had in the 19th century. Okay, how many of you ever heard of David Barton? Okay, now people know more about it because of David Barton and American history and black and white, so people started to educate themselves. Well, I'm telling you something. You folks in the South, Republicans, you got it going on down here. I just want you to know that. Because in the northern cities, it's a little bit different. You have some conservatives in pockets, but in Texas and Louisiana and South Carolina, down in the South, conservatives, most of you really get it. So give yourselves a hand. Give yourselves a hand. Watch the clock, when they run me up out of here. So the first thing I talked about is frequency. We got to go out there consistently. Relevancy, what does that mean? Relevancy means that I heard a motivational speaker say something one time, John Maxwell. It made a lot of sense to me. He said, sometimes we have a tendency to see people as we are and not as they are. And I know I've made this mistake too, but how many of you have possibly made the mistake that when you're talking to people, you go to them with your solutions before you even find out anything about them? How many of you made that mistake? There's some honest folks. People go, I've never done that. Yes, you have. How many of you, I'm going to get personal now. How many of you husbands have your wives tell you, man, stop trying to fix me? See, the women told on you. Or vice versa. It's a human instinct. And it's not just because we care. It is because we care. And we want to make it right. But sometimes what we need to do is humble ourselves. Get to know people. Build a relationship. That's why I said we get out to these communities and volunteer and teach and educate and do the things that we need to do. Sometimes we don't necessarily have to go out with our Republican hat on. You don't always have to expose your hand right away. Remember I told you that when I met that police chief, I didn't know anything about his politics initially? He won me over to his values before he even thought about talking to me about a political party. So once he did that and others came after him and helped me to make a connection with my values and the hypocrisy of my choices, then it was pretty easy for me to transition to conservative politics. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the dialogue should be our values. But we have to be frequent, and then we have to listen to people. Okay? That narrative about welfare and all that stuff, well, we have to expand that a little bit because it's somewhat unsophisticated. Okay, yes, there are a lot of people on welfare. But when you go out to these communities, you can talk about like Rick Romney did when he was Muhammad Ali in Baltimore last night. I saw it. I just had to get that in there. That was pretty funny. Because I thought that was Muhammad Ali on stage. I said, Muhammad Ali is white tonight. Because Jim Romney was dancing on the stage, you know, and he was just hitting them, wow. You know, that was the good stuff. I just had to get it off my chest. I love it. I was talking about it all night. So give Jim Romney a hand, y'all. You gotta really get some good stuff. Because he told President Obama, he said, you get to own your own plane and your own truth. I mean, your own home, but you don't get to own your own facts.